You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. Okay, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on one of our current clients, a longtime friend, Erin Casey Wolf, the co-franchisor at Bella Bridesmaids. So, Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And we've really enjoyed getting to work with you, Pat, and your whole team. And I love that you said friend because we feel the same way. So happy to be here today.
Oh, definitely. It's a pleasure to have you on. I would love to just give the audience a quick little overview on Bella Bridesmaids. Stop me if I misrepresent this, but given we've been working together for a long time, I hope I can get something pretty close to accurate here. I would say that Bella Bridesmaids is I guess I would describe it as a US-based franchise business with over 40 locations across the US. I know we've been talking a lot about positioning in particularly the past year or two. I think a good way to describe it is to say that you guys are a specialty women's boutique with a really strong focus in wedding party dresses and special events. How does that sound to you?
Sits perfectly with me, Pat. Our DNA is absolutely within dressing the wedding party. We really don't focus on the bridal gown. We've really made our reputation in just working with the bridesmaids and providing a best-in-class experience for them. But that said, have really learned there are so many more special occasions that demographic needs to be dressed for, and we are all too ready and excited to be able to step in and help fill our product categories and our marketing to help meet that need.
So give us a little bit of background. How did you get started with Bella Bridesmaids?
Well, the joke is that my mom always uses anything for wholesale bridesmaid dresses. So back in 2007, my mom and I were planning my wedding and shopping for bridesmaid dresses. And like many other business ideas that people kind of fall into, it started with having a less than great experience trying to find different mix and match bridesmaid dresses for my 8 bridesmaids. So a special fact about my mom and I, who co-own the business together, is that we actually started as number 5 franchisee in 2007 by opening our location of Bella Bridesmaids in downtown Chicago. But fast forward, Chicago very quickly grew to kind of break quite a bit of volume kind of records that I think the previous founder and franchisor had set for the business. And with that came really from my background and my mom's question to the then founder to say, hey, we're not complaining. These are high-class problems, but can we invest time, talent, or resources to be able to work smarter? And at that point, that was really focused on software development, but she was ready to tap out. We were at the time around 28 locations, and we, though didn't have our sights set on being franchisors of anything, did trust ourselves ethically. We felt like we knew the business in and out and what the footprint was, and felt like we wanted control of our own destiny. And so we stepped into the franchisor role and acquired the business in 2012. So it's been an exciting path. We now still remain headquartered in Chicago. We are very much so dialed in franchisors, which as we've hired consultants and had exposure to other franchises, I would say we're very unique in how tied to the business we still are. We own and operate our Chicago location, our New York location, and temporarily Tampa. And again, like you mentioned, there are over 40 independently owned and operated locations across the country, exclusively owned and operated by female entrepreneurs. So lots of single owner operators, mother, daughters, sisters. It's a really great network of really smart women in small business.
And to your point, I love the fact that you can come on the podcast and be able to speak really from 2 different angles of the franchise business model. That's a really robust business model in of itself, but being able to come in and say, hey, we have been one of these franchisees. That's how we got started. Then also being able to say, hey, now we're the main operator and now we're working directly with these franchisees and helping them to run more effective businesses. So let's step back. Let's talk about when Chicago location first opened up. The sense I got is that really, ultimately, you guys saw some incredible success from very early on. Where would you say the majority of your sales in those really early days were primarily coming from in Chicago?
Sincerely, I think 2 places. And remember, this is 2007. The website at that time was built in Flash, which seems like it's in a history book. There really was not a social media presence. I mean, the world was so very different. But I will tell you, as much as things change, they sort of stay the same. And I would say then and now, like, a lot of our business is, if not discovered or validated by word of mouth, either from a consumer base or the people within the wedding community that come before us in the planning process, such as bridal salons or venues or planners. But I would say it really helped us. And this is why the franchise model has always stayed like a really smart fit for us within the wedding industry. We are born and raised in Chicago. We have a very large network in Chicago. We understand that community. We had ties within the community. So when we opened Bella, tapping into every friend and family member that we knew to sort of evangelize the message that we were doing this, really getting out and playing well in the sandbox with all the bridal salons, the planners, the people that came before us, to really declare ourselves not as competition, but as a complementary business that we just were there to support them. I would say that is really what flagged our success in the early days. And the only other thing that is, I think, helped guide us through recessions, pandemics, et cetera, is a willingness to put the consumer first when we're trying to solve whatever business need that is in the marketplace at that time. And that shapes our hours of operation. It shapes our marketing and how we're messaging them when they discover us. It shapes how we communicate with them in our product offerings. But I know that sounds so simple. And I know it sounds like an almost dumb moment, but especially even in the franchise, I found common sense is not so common. And the reality is really staying rooted in putting the consumer first and following their path of discovery, what their need is, and following up with that as far as operations and product offerings. It has been something that we've had to continually revisit almost in a cycle of every year. So I think it brought us success early on, but the landscape changes. It also stays the same.
And to your point, I would say like the brand voice and that customer like passion has always been, I've always perceived it as such an important thing to you and the entire rest of the team. What are some of the things you've done to, let's say, like actively collect and then implement some of that big customer feedback? And then along those lines, what would you recommend that listeners do? Let's say if they're running, whether it's an e-com business, whether it's a physical store, would love to hear about that.
It's funny because this just came up even within our corporate team, and something that I find to be such a unique, special opportunity for our corporate team is that we still have this magical opportunity to work with our consumer base in our most natural environment, which is the sales floor. And I know that sounds small, but there are television shows that show like, what is it, behind the scenes CEOs, like that go undercover and try and learn the business at that like entry level. Or as corporations get larger, you can obviously pay for focus groups and you can pay for beta testing and all of these things. But I always equate, I was a dancer growing up, the idea of me, even in the position that I'm in over 17 years, of going back to the sales floor every once in a while. It can't happen all the time, but every once in a while, to actually just, like ballet, go back to the bar, or in business, it's going back to the sales floor and that core value proposition that we bring to customers, which is creating a best-in-class experience, trying to figure out what the need is for them today. And if our product offerings and our technology and the way that we're messaging them fits, I think it's been our secret weapon, is our team being able to really be with that consumer base, to interact with the technology and tools that we're developing, and really try and hone our message to be able to nimbly change and meet the need. Because we have seen so much private equity competition over the years come and go. Wedding industry gained a lot of attention after the recession, 08, 09. We did nothing but grow. The rest of business sort of declined. That brought a ton of competition and a lot of crowdedness into the marketplace because there was just a lot of money trying to get after this sort of like recession-proof business. But what I would say is the closer we remain to the consumer and really keeping our ear to the ground, whether it's through social media, whether it's being on the sales floor, or anything else, and really just not trying to stick to the same program that's been successful in the past, but switching it up. And I would say it's even affected our opportunities of working with your team at Intergrowth, following what is trending on SEO, different keywords, different color trends change year on year. The blogs that we create together have certainly sort of changed based on what we see as a trend. And we want you guys to help us channel and write about, but also what you guys are seeing trend from organic. So again, I just can't overemphasize enough having someone within your organization stay close to whatever it is that consumer base is and the core value proposition that created your business in the first place and created proof of concept. Staying close to that on a regular basis, I think has been, again, sometimes our greatest challenge, but also our greatest success in being able to like stick around and weather some really challenging times in the last 17 years.
And I'm really excited to get into talking about the pandemic. I had a couple other questions I want to dive into first that came as follow-ups from that. One of the little things I will add, just to share like call it the SEO agency perspective on things. One of the things that I've been able to learn directly from working with you guys is exactly what you're talking about, that idea of like the emerging trends and keeping your ear to the ground. I like to say when we're working, we spend a good chunk of money on getting the best SEO tools that we can. The only downside to the majority of those SEO tools is they tend to be based off of data that might be 12 months old. Most of them will take a look at this one sample set of data, typically a very large and a very good starting point sample set of data, to say, hey, over the previous 12 months, here's how many people were searching for these core themes. So that's great in an industry where themes don't change, where there aren't these up and coming trends. I would say it's been so eye-opening for me, like as an SEO person, to be able to work with you and the rest of the team and hear you say, hey, we're getting a ton of demand for dusty rose colored dresses right now. Oftentimes we'll look into it and we'll see, wow, this is phenomenal. None of the search tools show any sort of meaningful search volume for this. But time and time again, we collaborate together. We create that really great resource about dusty rose dresses, let's say, and we end up seeing this incredible momentum that comes out of these pages. So I'll just second that. Being able to listen to your gut and follow those trends as they're coming up can just create so many great opportunities for the business, whether in SEO or otherwise.
Absolutely. I almost have nothing to add because you recapped it perfectly. It is just the more you can get directly with the early trendsetters, and there's no more authentic way than to just listen to your customer and hear what they're coming in and asking for. And that trend volume will follow. But certainly in the last 2 years more than ever, I would say we really live like quarter by quarter. Things really have just morphed and shifted so much more rapidly in the last 2 years, even than the 15 that preceded it.
So before we start diving into talking a little about the pandemic and really how you and the team responded to that, I did want to ask you, putting yourself back in the franchisor seat again, feel free to answer this in either segment, but would love to hear from you about some of the resources that were either provided to you by the main operator, let's say, or resources that would have been really helpful to have had provided to you as a franchisee. Granted, this is asking you to go 15 years back in time, but would love to talk about some of those resources that you found or would have found really helpful as that franchisee really trying to run your own store.
Yeah, we were so lucky to come in at the point that we did, and we had a wonderful relationship with the founder. And sometimes the best business concepts come out of like a really organic reaction to a need in a marketplace. And I would say Bella Bridesmaids really was just that. It was a rapid reaction to a white space that was in the market. And it became a franchise very quickly for the right reasons, because especially in the wedding industry, when word of mouth is paramount, and listen, when your primary client base is women planning their weddings and emotions run really high, customer service is king. And so having that person that locally owns and operates each location with skin in the game, a reputation in the marketplace that they want to uphold, it very quickly proved to the founder originally that, like, God, franchising probably is the right move here, because doing this in a corporate way dilutes that attention toward customer service. I think it really needs to be an owner-operator model. And so we did franchise, but it was really franchise light in that there was a really nice framework to follow the brand guide and to sort of keep your overhead low and open up within the certain, but certainly as we grew and broke sort of those volume records, like we were growing up together, which was an awesome opportunity, but those pain points were really there. And when you are part of a franchise, what I have learned, and I hold myself so accountable to, and it is what keeps us up at night, is that there is a very strong burden of responsibility on the franchisor to be ahead of the curve when it comes to whatever the next business challenge is, and make sure that you're doing everything that you can to pave a path for growth. And what I would say is, at the time when we were all coming into this new brand and it was emerging and we were all growing up together, those were the pain points, was we were creating volume together. So it wasn't like I had a lot of tools or KPIs to tell me like, this is what you do when you hit this. Or, I mean, we were doing over $800,000 taking credit cards over fax machines or phone. Like there was no PCI compliance. Like it was a lot. And so now something that is both a blessing and also a challenge is just us trying to always create more, we call it sharing is caring, of all of these key performance metrics, all the lead measures, whether it's store traffic numbers, conversion rates, the things that come before sales. Everyone wants sales to be high. But what we have found out of our experience as franchisees, we were so hungry for, what does success mean? How many people should I be seeing every month? And how should I be converting or expecting to convert them in order to make this sales goal? So I think that's something that we were hungry for as the brand was emerging, and we were really putting the business concept together at the time. And something that we're continually striving for is, again, really strong KPIs, sharing is caring across the markets so that people can compare and can goal set appropriately. And then the next piece is really creating a successful structure around marketing that creates a baseline for national messaging, but an easy way for franchisees to feel confident opting in and spending their money locally in a way that feels like the smartest return on their investment within their own zip codes. So how do we work together with this union of small businesses that we have to leverage that strength and create a smarter way for you to spend your money to really drive more traffic and make every dollar count when it comes to spending in that local marketplace that matters the most at the end of the day to each franchisee?
I want to skip ahead a couple of years because I want to talk to you a little about the pandemic. And what I think would be helpful is to give the listeners a little bit of context on the business, but sharing even just from my own perspective, I so clearly remember January of 2020, at least the online store, probably the best month we had ever had together at that time, both in terms of traffic, revenue, organic traffic, no matter how you slice it. And then we have 60 days later that it at least feels like the US more or less gets shut down. So I'd love if you could share a little context on what happened to the physical stores during that time. Let's start out there.
There's so much to unpack. And I feel like it's similar to like mother's amnesia about having children. You sometimes sort of like darken out some of these moments, but it was such an incredible time and a learning curve. 2020 was absolutely one of the best starts to any year that we had had. 2019 was our largest rate of growth as far as store count, both new stores and also existing stores transferring. January was amazing. We were off like a rocket. There is a very strong seasonality with our core business of wedding party dresses. January through about April, May tends to be the highest sales grossing months. Whereas like we have decent summers, but that's more customer service, servicing the dresses as they come in. And then we do a decent fourth quarter, but really a very, very big portion of our business is January through April, May. We're kind of like accountants in that way. And really, when the world sort of shut down, I would say, number one, we sprung to very immediate action, and communication was, we very quickly learned, going to be the most reliable tool. Like we couldn't predict what was happening, but where Mom and I really just felt our responsibility was the highest was just in creating a very strong network of communication throughout the stores on anything and everything from how we were closing to how we were messaging customers. How are we pivoting to virtual? How are we using the technology in place to service the customer needs that were already in the pipeline, thinking their weddings were still going to happen in April? And then very early on, it became clear how different the country was going to react as far as state by state guidelines. Once that April date rolled around, May rolled around, I was headquartered in Chicago. Chicago was a very, very unique place during this time period because not only were we very strictly locked down with COVID, but there was a lot of just civil unrest that continued through the summer that really compromised Chicago's ability to do business or reopen as usual. Whereas my family and I took it as an opportunity to travel, to visit a lot of stores. And again, what you'll find that I think is a unique opportunity that I think sometimes can be our secret sauce is, again, very similar to like going back to the bar and ballet, going back to the sales floor, listening to consumers. We visited all the stores that were open. So we like packed my kids in the car, my husband and I, and we did a full tour starting in Indiana, down to Nashville, down to Birmingham, Louisiana, Tennessee, like you name it. We were just going to visit as many stores as we could. And it would be so fascinating how different each market would be as far as their reopen process. And then you just saw the country bounce back in a really different way because Atlanta, Birmingham, Alabama, they were doing pre-COVID numbers by late 2020, early 2021. And you had San Francisco and New York that were just desolate. And so I would say, again, communication. And then when I couldn't get the answers or my finger on the pulse of what was allowing some stores to bounce back faster than others, it would sometimes be getting in the market and going to visit. And then I have to shift. It was also a time that we really dug in with your team and our paid digital strategy teams, because what was also just super clear was the consumers no longer could rely on that word of mouth referral from a friend that had just used us, or that word of mouth referral from the bridal salon they just shopped in. Online became paramount as far as discovery because people were still sometimes slowly getting engaged, but they just needed to go online directly. And so a lot of our competition actually exited the space in like 2020, 2021. Even David shrunk in 22 to 23. But online, we had a couple competitors that strengthened during that time. And that's when we really had to double down with our digital community and our digital partners being like, all right, guys, we need to claw our way into, like, from an SEO perspective, that top 10. We've been tirelessly gritty in getting there, but also from a paid perspective, really digging into our own pockets and being like, if word of mouth is no longer going to be able to serve us in the same way that it always has, we have to buy eyeballs back in order to shore up the business. And again, meet that need for a consumer and be on their registry, because a big piece of what had built our brand was just kind of handicapped for a minute. So again, it's every quarter by quarter was so different. And I think really almost continues to be, I think we're on the other side of it now, but really through 2023, I would say it was really quarter by quarter, market by market, wildly different, and really digging into not only the digital discovery of consumers, but also then physically going to visit a lot of the markets to see what we could do in real life and then also online to just, again, shore up and rebuild.
And it was being able to look at it from, call it from like the SEO side of things, being the partner working with you and trying to figure out, hey, how can we keep sales numbers up, at least for the online store? It was just really inspirational seeing, I would say, the thick skin that really you and the entire team took on to say, hey, we know it's going to be a down couple of months. Maybe it's going to be a down couple of years. We believe in the long-term vision here, though. And exactly as you said, just doing the best you could to communicate with the team. I remember being able to share some insights with some of the franchisees as well, just what we were seeing on the SEO side. It was just very impressive the way that you conducted that. Within that, probably one of the more challenging questions I think you probably had to face during the pandemic was, how did you think about, let's say, expense cutting and either maintaining profitability or dipping into maybe the Bella savings account? Talk to me a little about how you managed to make the finances work during that, 6 to 12 month period that the business was really negatively affected by COVID, obviously.
I think it's such a great question. And I would say it's been, from a self-reflective place, our greatest place of learning on the other side of the pandemic. I kind of go back to that idea that sometimes what you just rely on because it's such a basic instinct in you, or like that feeling of like common sense, of course I'm going to scale back because this is the time to, is not always so common. And that absolutely is not intended to be a dig. It's more sometimes what feels so instinctive and plain to some just isn't to others. And so what I would say is, through the pandemic, listen, my mom and I didn't set out to necessarily, we didn't even set out to be franchisees, let alone franchisors. We did always know that we were very hardworking. We had worked a lot of corporate positions. We wanted to be able to operate our own business. But I would say it came from a very business-minded, almost gritty place. And it has almost been a source of challenge for us, is knowing when to sort of really scale down, be gritty and protective, but also like when to scale up and like be more risk excited or have more of an appetite for risk. Like, we've had to really struggle as we've had to pivot through each one of those. But through COVID, we were very communicative within the franchisee community about getting your PPP money and securing your EIDL lines of credit. However, what all of a sudden came out and we very quickly learned is our instincts in our own corporate store was, we shrunk down. I was working. We shrunk the team down in a really respectful way, but like, we were operating at a super, super tight level during that time, regardless of PPP money, regardless of the EIDL. We were really mindful of every dollar being spent in our own corporate store. But I will say, when it came to pivoting and spending on tools and technology for the franchisee, what created like a lot of sweat for us, we did not slow on that investment. So that was sort of very important to us, because the pandemic really taught us, God, technology is more important than ever. We need these tools that meet consumer needs wherever they are. They need to be digital. Some people want in real life experiences. Some people don't. Some people want to shop in store. Meet them where they are. We need these tools. We cannot slow the spending on that. Let's shrink where we can. So I think we were really mindful coming out of the pandemic, where I would say we had to then really have tough conversations internally and be like, hey, we're not taking anything out of this, but every dollar that comes in from this business needs to be spent now back on marketing, now back on tech. Like, we need to get these eyeballs back. We need to be spending. That was a scary leap that we took as franchisors. And what has been my greatest learning curve and a great source of pain and reflection in the last year has been watching how different franchisees managed those funds through the pandemic. Were they able to shrink down? Did they insert themselves in the business, or did they manage it with staff? How did that affect profitability during that time? Were they working with the consumer to listen to what the need was? Were they open and operating when the consumer needed them to? Was the product offering fitting? The people that inserted themselves in the business, that scaled down and were really like kind of a little bit gritty during COVID, they stuck around, they scaled, and then more importantly, they started spending when it was time to spend and that marketplace was bouncing back. The people that did not and stayed a little bit removed, they paid for more staff. Even when sales were going down, it really affected profitability. It strangles you. When it's time to spend, you no longer have anything to spend. So we had to learn a really important lesson where we had to see some doors close. And I look at that as a moment of reflection, because your question earlier said, what as a franchisee would I have wanted at the beginning? And I would say, as a franchisor, what I am growing up, frankly, and growing into is learning how to have harder conversations, even when unpopular, about telling people what they don't want to hear, which sometimes is, you can't afford to pay other people to run your business right now. You probably need to be there yourself. You can't afford to be closed on Sundays and evenings. Like, you probably need to be open because that's when people are shopping. And you can't afford to shut down your advertising and marketing because you just aren't sure if it's going to give you a return. You have to, business is risk, and you have to be there to do it and see it through. And I think we could have maybe tried a little harder, but we just wanted everyone to be healthy and happy. And we did that. And I have no regrets about it. But I would say I've learned to be more articulate in what's working and what's not, and really hammering that sharing is caring message home with franchisees. And I would say the most important thing, and I know I've talked for a minute, but you mentioned the online store a couple times. The most important key learning is that through this period, we've seen the same trends affect the online store as far as traffic and demand as have affected the brick and mortar. And when we talk to our designers and our suppliers, they will often echo that same trend. So I think in business, there are different mindsets to have. It's easy to look out the window and be like, my business is down because online is shooting up everywhere. Everyone's shopping online. It's just a waste of time. But at the same time, I really value where we're able to sit. And I love having BellaBridesmaids.com and this e-commerce store along with our over 40 retail locations with a virtual showroom, because I frankly think feelings are not facts, and it keeps us honest with when I see a trend happening with the online sales and traction, I'm often seeing that same trend happen with the same store sales and traction. And all of a sudden in April of this year, we found ourselves doing the same store volume this year in April that we did with significantly less stores than we did last April. Similarly, e-com is on the up. It's very correlated. It's not like online goes up and then all of a sudden the stores suffer. I've been able to watch the trend really sort of mirror. And I would say in other brands that I watch, I see a lot of people now backing into brick and mortar that started as digitally native brands. And I think it's really, again, going back to the consumer, following what that need is. They want the ease of an online discovery and an online checkout. But God, for an emotional purchase for a special occasion, when they want to feel their best, they want to post it on social media. They want to be just wearing something that they feel amazing in. It usually begins with an in real life experience somewhere just to validate that purchase before they're going to make it.
You hit on a lot of phenomenal points there. I'll let the last 60 seconds that you shared there and ask you what I think is going to be a very repetitive question, but I think it's so important to reemphasize this idea that you just shared, which is, let's say I'm running an e-commerce brand that sells clothing. Let's find a tangible example. Let's say I'm a women's shoes company. We'll go a half a degree removed, let's say. What would you say is the biggest reason that I should consider opening physical stores on top of my e-com business that I'm running online?
I'm going to give a real life example and conversation that I just had with one of our suppliers recently. And so it will go back to dresses, but I think you could apply it to widgets and shoes and anything in between. But we have a wholesale relationship with them. And it does sort of frustrate us because they segment out their inventory. This inventory is for e-com only, and this inventory is for the wholesale relationship. It does not reflect consumer behavior. Consumers cannot reconcile why something is available in one place online, but the physical store that they are shopping in, that they have a relationship with, can't meet that need. Having these separate stock positions doesn't make sense. And one of the things that we were talking about was brand discovery and the idea of doing some trunk shows together. And I was like, the reality is we're pivoting our business to better meet the consumer needs. I know they need wedding party dresses. I know we have this great niche within our competitive set of creating a best-in-class experience around bridesmaid dresses. But I also know that every time I'm selling a bridesmaid dress, the mom that's there wants to talk about what I would recommend for her to wear. And then all of a sudden we're talking about the engagement party that's a summer soiree in 2 months, and do I have anything for them? And all of a sudden I'm realizing this is something that instinctively I do, which is source recommendations for all of those different things. But really, I should be doing that within my own store. And so I talked to this designer and I said, I really feel strongly, I'm not in a financial position to take a stock position on all of this inventory, but you are sitting on all of this inventory that you are using to stock this e-commerce store. And then what? You're selling to outlets or doing something else after it doesn't move. What if we partner, we do trunk shows, and you come into my physical space, we work together for a weekend, we listen to the consumer feedback, you seed us with product, we sell through anything that we can. I all of a sudden place a buy because I have a better feel for what's going to move. And you feel better because you just move some product and go back to, your home base with a better exercise. And again, that consumer knowledge, that sales floor information and feedback. And we're doing it. And the feedback from them, I was like, we can even figure out a market. He's like, listen, we're a digitally native brand. I never get the opportunity to talk to consumers. I never get to see what's going to move. And you're right. I have to deal with where to put all this product after. Let's do this. And so I think that's the thing is I've never had a very singular mindset. I'm very gray area. I hate conversations that are very singular around e-commerce is just where it's at solely. Amazon is taking over the world. Everything is taking over the world. Digitally native brands are just where it's at. It's more efficient. I see it. I understand what makes our e-commerce customer different. Our in-store consumer really needs a lot more hand-holding and customer service. There is a reality. I don't find that the longer term, most successful brands throughout history won't be the ones that recognize consumers want to decide how to shop. And if you don't meet them where they are and reflect their decision of how they want to purchase, you will be leaving out a significant portion. So if you exclude all these people that want in real life discovery, fine, you'll tap out as the digitally native brand. And I think it works for a bit. I don't think it has that longer term relationship success. And then vice versa. I always like to say, I think we're stronger being a network of these locally owned and operated businesses because I think that's what allows us to be successful longer term. I mean, it's important to be local and have that local relationship. It's paramount. But you also need that broad network to really, again, create longevity for the brand. So again, that was like long-winded, but I cannot reconcile just online or brick and mortar. I really think finding a harmony and a partnership between that wholesale retail model is what we're working on so strongly in this next 2-year, 3-year stretch.
I totally agree. I even think of a small tangible example that comes to mind for me with the benefits of those two different channels working, so cohesively. And what sticks out to me, my wife and I bought a pillow for her a week ago. It was the type of purchase that I had done some research because it's time to get new pillows. And I found this pillow and I said, Eva, you were going to love this pillow. I think it's going to be really good quality, great reviews online. Placed the order for her. She's used it probably for 3 nights and has told me I really don't like this pillow. If I was smarter, what we would have done is we would have gone to a physical store. We would have tried out 10 different pillows. She would have found the dream pillow for her. And then from there, maybe she still places the order online because she doesn't want to carry this big, bulky pillow with her on the subway going home. To me, that it's such just a powerful opportunity there. And you mentioned the idea of, especially with purchases that have such a strong emotional connection to them, being able to go and to see the product or the clothes item, just try it on, to take photos with it, to get your friends and family to weigh in and say, hey, what do you think of this particular dress? Do you think this is right for the wedding party?
Absolutely.
I think what's so tough. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you know what? I was going to laugh that we've had the same pillow mishap happen in our household. My husband was absolutely on the same side as you, and I was on the same side as Ava. But something I wanted to tease out there, even with the pillow experience, and like I said, I sell dresses, but this can be applicable to pillows, shoes, widgets, you name it. The responsibility on all business owners, whether they are on a retail side of things, a wholesale side of things, a fulfillment side of things, is there is a real renaissance right now where it's like the whole model needs to be revisited. And so exactly what you were talking about, which is I feel like we need to honor the brick and mortar as a place for excellent experience, discovery, and decision-making. We need to partner from there to create a more efficient way of doing business on the back end, oftentimes with drop shipping, oftentimes with different forms of fulfillment than we're used to doing on a wholesale perspective. Because in order for all of this kind of like go forward plan brick and mortar and e-commerce to work together, the business behind the scenes does need to reallocate itself. Shipping and logistics are unthinkably expensive right now. They have shifted so significantly post-COVID. And I keep telling our suppliers, guys, I am not paying you to box something for me to unbox it, to rebox it for the end consumer. That is truly insanity at this point of paying for materials, shipping, and time. But it also just like isn't even efficient. We're just like paying multiple forms of shipment and increasing the lead time. So I think even with your pillow experience, something that I want to ferret out for the business owners, because I think that's who the podcast is really geared toward, is where I want to call all of us out for being responsible to ourselves for reevaluating the partnerships that we have is don't continue to accept the same status quo of doing business. Listen to the consumer, how they need and want to shop. Focus on getting the product in their hands and creating the experience they need to transact. Figure out how to manage the business monies between the two of you fairly on the back end. And it might look different than it has in the past. But if you have a good partnership, figure it out. And I think that's what we're really leaning into at this time with our strongest partners is we all want to be here for a long time. We can't pretend that doing the same thing is super comfortable from a margin perspective. So let's change it up a little bit with tech and other ways. And I think that's really been a big focus for us.
I'd love to put you back into, I would call it like the franchisor mindset, and really for others maybe that are thinking about building a franchise model for their business, call it key systems, processes, training manuals, you name it, that you'd really recommend that aspiring franchisors build out for their business now so that they can start to build out that franchise model, say a year or maybe even 5 years from now.
Absolutely. And there's such big, important questions. But again, I go back to you have to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk, meaning do every single job and know every single metric from a labor perspective, from a margin perspective, et cetera. Like, what does it cost you to drive traffic in your door? What is that return on investment? So everything that you ask of franchisees, make sure that you have done and you can prove out with relative accuracy that it will give them a return on investment. Because again, being a franchisor, and I am humbled by it every day, the level of responsibility that I feel to franchisees that have made a commitment both financially and from a family and a time perspective to this brand, I feel overwhelmingly responsible on a continued basis to make sure that every dollar they spend on labor, on marketing, on product feels like it will get them a reasonable return on investment. And whenever we're making changes, test it yourself. If you're considering being a franchisor, it's because you've probably found a model that with reasonable success, you can project a return on investment. Package that model. We have a very strict brand guide. We have a great, robust training manual. We've developed all of our own proprietary tools so that the majority of the business all flows through. All of our QuickBooks have the same products and services. The more uniform you can get in the operation, the better you can be equipped to, again, have very objective conversations when things go off the rails because you're measuring the same things. Again, feelings are not facts. You got to keep score. When a store starts to fail, if they fail, they're going to blame you. So you have to have good tools in place to measure whatever lead metrics there are before that lag metric, like sales. For us, it's store traffic conversion. We track that, frankly, weekly. That comes way later or way before sales, kind of like weight gain and weight loss. You have to track calories and activity before you can expect a change there. So I think really having your metrics in place, and then more importantly, as your business evolves, do not keep your head in the sand and keep doing the same things if the marketplace is shifting. But test new things, test it once. If it works, it's a happy accident. Test it twice. If it works, it's a coincidence. Test it 3 times across your system. If it works, it's probably something to create more systems around, invest in and implement. And so I think that's what we've really been able to do over the years, is where we've needed to change it up. And you have certainly worked with us on this with marketing. It's happened a lot with technology, and then it's happened a lot with product offerings. We don't race to change things across the whole system immediately. Keep your baseline, keep that humming. But as the marketplace shifts, test twice, test 3 times, then you create kind of a game plan and a playbook for it that you then push out to the whole system. And then last but not least, have a healthy appetite toward managing change. Whenever you roll out technology, whenever you ask people to spend more money on marketing, no matter how much you prove it, no matter how black and white you feel like that success metric or return on investment is, there is just the human nature of people's variability as far as their appetite for risk or how willing they are to take that leap. In order to manage change and manage it well, I think you need a little bit of patience in order to take people with you. And so let your early adopters jump in first and let the others follow, and frankly, keep reporting so that, again, they can start to see the people that succeed doing whatever it is that you're asking them to do. And then you got to reinforce, which again, I'm still learning. Like, I'm not always the best at cracking down, but it's an important piece of franchising and something that we all need to do. So from time to time.
So I think just taking one little tidbit that you shared there, one of the things that you had mentioned was the idea of just being so knowledgeable about every detail of your business. And we actually have a perfect example of this, right now as we sit here on this podcast. So for those who are just listening, not watching the video, Erin is wearing what I would describe as like a tiara-esque Bella Bridesmaid head gown, let's call it. So tell us, what are you wearing right now?
So it's actually a headband from Lisa Doogie. So a lot of what we've noticed about our consumers is it's not just that singular dress that they sort of want to make the decision on. A lot of times, in order to sell that dress, you have to complete the look from head to toe. That includes headbands, earrings, sometimes shoes, handbags. And so something that we really hold ourselves accountable to. And now I'm sad I'm just not wearing a Bella dress on this podcast, but really embracing what it is that we are styling and selling to our consumers, interacting with these brands on our own time, wearing them in our own communities with our own family and friends. And that creates the most authentic experience when it comes to really deciding what products we want to carry and will suggest to our customers. So yeah, my dad calls my headband a tiara, but it's a headband, but it's certainly a really cute one to create or finish off that little white dress look. So we love to wear it.
And listeners, we'll include a link to this headband in the show notes. Definitely check it out. Erin, it's been such a pleasure having you on today. One final question for today. Where can the listeners go, I would say, A, to learn more about Bella Bridesmaids and maybe learn insights that Bella is sharing regularly, and then 2, just be able to connect with you, learn more of the insights that you have to share?
Absolutely. Well, you can certainly go to our website, bellabridesmaids.com, and for anyone within the retail or women's wear wedding community, social media is sort of where it's at. So again, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, etc. That's where we'll really be able to kind of showcase emerging trends and give you some local flair across the board from the stores. And you can always reach me at franchise@bellabridesmaids.com if it ever makes sense to network.
So Erin Casey Wolf, everyone, the co-franchisor of Bella Bridesmaids. Erin, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Pat, for having me.
thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.